So for our next speaker, if you've been paying attention to our large automation donut, we talk about visibility, insights, and action. For the next session, we're going to talk about how, when you notice, hey, something is not quite right, maybe we should go do something about that. So for our next session, Henrik and Nils will talk about Accedian and NSO playing well together.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me, and I guess that all of you now wonder why did you have Depeche Mode as an entry song? For those of you who were here last year, I had Depeche Mode at that time as well. No fantasy, and the thing is, when me and Henrik not meets on the office, we see each other over Depeche Mode concerts. So that was the background. Anyway, we'll talk about connecting the dots between network automation and service assurance, and it's really focused on you as NSO seasoned service developer. But before we go into that, I take the opportunity of a few minutes of fame. So on Thursday, we have a roadmap session for NSO. We really would like to hear about your latest ideas, what you would like to see in NSO. So now you have like 3 seconds to scan the QR code here to add your suggestions for future NSO development. And that was the 3 seconds. We will show this QR code a few more times. I think that based on the morning sessions, we all already know that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. From an NSO perspective, so as a service developer, we are so focused on provisioning, so we typically don't really see that. And in this session, we'll talk a little about that, how to connect the dots in between the provisioning, orchestration, and the assurance from a service developer point of view. And with this stairs, I also would like to recap the journey that most of us have been part of the latest years. We started with ad hoc scripting for network automation, doing whatever kind of scripts to fix whatever you wanted to do on a daily basis from your Word documents, and copy and paste it into more reusable frameworks where you and your team starting to try out different frameworks to actually do a streamlined automation. Going to the next step about model-driven configuration lifecycle, all the things that you do in NSO, create, update, delete, and open, and focus on the create state, and then let NSO do the lifecycle of the service itself. But what we'll talk about today, given that knowledge and the competence, how can you then add the capabilities to actually monitor each and every service instance that you provision and orchestrate with NSO? So that's really what we will talk about, and there will be more information later on today on even more details. But with that intro, I hand it over to Henrik.
Thank you, Nils Petter. Thank you very much. In order to properly instrument the service, we of course need to start at the intent at the top. So this is what we've been working with both the NSO team and CNC over the past months since the acquisition of Accedian, and also before that, as Rana mentioned. So we want to be able to define an intent of what the service should look like. NSO or CNC can look at the intent, provision using the green arrows, the traditional pieces of the network, like the routers, the policies, etc., but also adding the blue arrows to go in and define an assurance, a test of the newly provisioned service. So this is what we wanted to achieve and what we have achieved with our integration. So what's needed to do this in your network today? You of course need the orchestration piece. You need NSO. You need the NED that talks to the Skylight platform. And you need a Skylight deployment. So in Skylight, I printed some details of what Skylight contains inside. It's really not relevant, but it's interesting to know we have a gateway on top that talks the YANG models, RESTconf YANG, that NSO and CNC can interact with. We also have traditional REST APIs there if you do not have an excellent platform like NSO. But underneath, we have our orchestration of our own sensors, our own probes that take care of the instrumentation of the network. We have the analytics piece that can ingest data, not only from the Accedian probes, but as Clarence mentioned, in the IPM space, we can also take in any kind of telemetry data, time series, and correlate that with our measurements in the analytics engine. We have alerting built in there as well, of course. And at the bottom, the sensor layer. So I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about that, because not everyone has the luxury of having a Silicon One platform deployed in all their networks. So you may need to instrument using an external probe or a probe from the Accedian Skylight product family. We have both small hardware pluggable probes that you can plug into an empty port that gives very good accuracy, and actually also up to 14 million packets per second of throughput testing if you want to do that with these devices. We have VMs that you can deploy to get testing from anywhere where you have some kind of compute. And we have miniaturized test agents that are targeted for specific test types that can be instantiated and deployed in the network to do testing for us as well. So depending on which instrumentation method you choose, there are different ways of how to deploy them. Of course, an SFP or a hardware module, you need to go physically and plug it in to your network. You can't really do that automatically. But what we do is that we allow you, of course, to provision them automatically. So we have zero-touch provisioning for these products. For the virtual machines and do testing with them, you can use OpenStack or any kind of VM orchestration to actually deploy the test function, the test VNF. And for the container functions, the sensor agents, you can use Helm charts, Docker swarms, any type of automation there to actually get the test function instantiated where you want it. Because you absolutely need to have the test points where your point of interest is in the network. You want to put them at A and Z so that you can measure the whole service regardless of what devices are between to do an end-to-end test. So, finally, the first, sorry, I forgot to mention this. We are also, of course, compatible with a number of third-party standards responders out there. So you could use the Skylight probing functions to test towards virtually any type of layer 2, layer 3 device that supports a responder or a reflector. So you can get many test points for free as well in the network. But now, first CLI shot of the day, isn't it? Yeah? So great. Some developers here are happy now too to see some nice screenshots. So this is how simple the provisioning of a Skylight agent is. You basically just need two parameters. You need IP address and port for it to go and register, and you need to give it some metadata tags so that Skylight can identify it and refer it to where it sits in the topology. Some additional stuff like authentication secrets and so on, but that's basically all you need. So to launch it, you just do a Docker compose, in this case, to spin it up. And since our images are also available on Google Cloud, on GCR, they're automatically downloaded if you have internet access on the platform. So that quickly, the container is up and has registered with Skylight. So we are now ready to start setting up testing. So to do this, the model, the intent-based model we have developed, is based on endpoints. So an endpoint is a service endpoint. It's where your, for example, a VPN service has an entry or an exit point in the network. So usually you need two of these. You need a source and a destination, two endpoints that define that. And to tie them together, you define a session. And this is a test session using typically UDP packets, or it could be layer 2. But it's going to test between those two endpoints according to certain parameters that you set up on how many packets per second, how large packets, class of service, etc., VLANs. And you define which endpoints you want to be the sender and responder/receiver for this. Then when you have defined all your sessions, you might have multiple classes of service, you may have multiple paths, you may have a full mesh. You tie that all together into a service definition, which points back to all the sessions you had defined in the in the setup that allows Skylight to correlate based on all this. So we could take a look at the full service. We could take a look at a single set of endpoints for a sort of session or a specific class of service. I'm going to show that a little bit later, what that looks like. So this is Skylight again, but this is the very empty dashboard I created because we have no service yet. That's why I brought Nils Petter here, he's the service master. So in this example, I have a map view that hopefully will show some services later on. But right now, there's nothing in there. You can see on the Sensors tab, I have the endpoints defined for the sensors. So we're not going to deploy those with NSO today. We could do that using Ansible scripts or similar, but they're already predefined. But they have no test sessions defined at the bottom. So they're empty. They're just sitting there waiting for a service to be defined. Looking at the inventory table, yeah, it's also empty. So, Nils, please, can you get my Skylight system a little bit more interesting?
And so also looking at the audience now, when Henrik talking, I see that you are now super excited about CLI and things like that. There will be more about CLIs in the afternoon, and it's only like 14 minutes left to lunch. So stay with us for just a few more minutes, okay? So, NSO. How do we do this then? Okay, I'll use one of the most traditional examples we have in the example collection of NSO, the layer 3 VPN, and we have a Volvo VPN set up between a data center, and we have London and Stockholm. In the service model of this example, you have the information of like AS numbers, route distinguishers, IPs, and things like that. And what we're actually doing now is adding the information in the Young model of the service for the assurance part as well. So what kind of sessions should we set up, the frequency, what kind of test patterns and test methods we're actually adding to the same L3 VPN examples that we had before. And how does this look like then? So now you see some kind of a familiar view, hopefully. You have a commit manager from NSO. Just a small point, it's a slightly new look and feel. This is NSO 6.3 that we released in April. We have updated the UI as well, but we still have the same capabilities about the diff, the calculation of the minimal diff. So when we now add the capability of actually setting up sessions in between the different sites from London to the data center, we're adding a few things, what Henrik talked about. So we have service metadata that actually identifies the session itself, or the service name. And then we have the service endpoints. We have at least one of them in this one. The thing is, this is all part then of the service model and the template, so instantiated with the template data. And then if we look at this one, it's further down into the diff set, or the difference will be sent to the devices, and this time we actually then treat the Accedian controller as a device. You have the information about the service endpoint for both the sender as well as the receiver, and also how the metadata for the session. What does that mean? And then, of course, the updated service intent in the end. And here you also have a thing that I didn't highlight, is the out start true. That actually means that now we provision the Skylight architecture, but please also start to monitor this specific service instance. So will Henrik and Skylight be happy?
We'll see. We'll see. This is exciting. It is a recorded demo, though, so it should work. It should work if everything is with us. So if I now look into Skylight on the objects of the test agents, we can see there is a session created. It's the London service. We can see it's running by the green tick box there. If we go up to the inventory, we can see that there are two new session definitions on the system. If we click on them, we can look at the metadata that was added by NSO. So NSO added the endpoint IDs that allow us to correlate and tell which sessions belong together into a service. The metadata for the coordinates I had added previously when I put the agent up. So the agent has the physical locality metadata, but the logical is the one that we get from NSO in this case. Speaking of the metadata, there are a number of categories that are predefined in Skylight for the use case of CNC and NSO, including those IDs for network endpoints, the service endpoints, etc. But you have also the possibility to create your own sets of metadata if you want to look at building numbers, floor levels, whatever type of use case you have where you want to be able to group your measurement data together. You can add a metadata tag into Skylight, and we will then allow you to correlate and filter and slice and dice based on that value. If we go up now and look at the dashboard I created, it should hopefully allow me now to select the service. So you can see there is now a Volvo service that I can select, and it will then bring up the view of the dashboard that I picked. And this is fully customizable, as Ron also mentioned earlier. Each of these cards you can remove and change and pick whatever kind of details you want to look at. So here we are seeing a delay on the top one, connectivity packet loss on the middle one. I also have an SLA limit there of 1.5%. That's sort of the red line in the packet loss graph. We can visualize the data in tables as well, of course, and we have the map view that allows you to show colored-based views of the data based on those geo-coordinates that I added as metadata tags to the sender and receivers of the tests. So imagine now that the service is up and running for a couple of weeks, but suddenly something happens, and Skylight fires off an alert. We can do that through many different ways. We have plugins that are optional for, you can do emails, you can do integration with SaaS tools, we can send as plain alerts over MQTT, etc., etc. But we can alert and see that something has happened with the packet loss on the London link. You can see in the graph it's turned red, and the loss has been above the 1.5% limit up there. So going back to Nils, are you responsible for this? Why did this happen?
Can't be.
Yeah.
But at least let's do a check sync of the service itself. Of yes, and yeah, the service is not in sync. So something in the service intent is changed probably. So let's do the check sync, and then let's do a dry run of the differences and redeploy the service. And here we see that we are then faced with some bloke have been out there and changing the bit rate on the London site, the CE3. And that's not good, because then Henrik saw the problem, hopefully before the customer, and then we just redeploy it and off we go. Still reusing the same service models that we all talked about, and now it's the final one.
Yeah. So we've seen with Skylight that very often the source of issues is either human error, which could be in this case someone goes in manually, configures something out of band on a router, and that is not managed by NSO, so it's done outside of the automation domain. The other one may be that you may have a functional provision service, but you have also redundancy, and when the service switches over to the backup path, for one reason or another, that backup path is not configured properly for QoS, for example. That's very, very common that it happens, because you rarely use the backup path, and when you finally use it, you discover, okay, QoS was 0 on that one. But looking in Skylight, we should be happy. We see the packet loss has gone down. So if we zoom in on the last 5 minutes, everything is now green and happy. And you see the packet loss is 0 for the last time period. You saw it zoomed in there in the graph. That's the way of limiting the data set that you look at. If I zoom out again to look at the last hour, for example, then I will still have the red there saying that last hour there was an issue. Now we used NSO to sort of try to identify the problem. But Skylight also has options to allow you to do some troubleshooting directly from Skylights if you have the proper set of tools installed. So I mentioned the sensor agents, software containers. So we have 4 of them deployed here in this demo in the Stockholm instance. The one at the bottom is the throughput test thing. So you can use that to test TCP throughput, either between 2 agents or from an agent to a standard iPerf service in the network. There is also a test agent for data transfer that's using HTTP or FTP to test towards a real HTTP server and also reporting DNS and that sort of thing. We can also trigger traceroute tests from the Skylight platform to look at the path, the hops from source A to a destination B, and compare these test runs over time as well. So these are all options that are available in the Skylight toolbox. And within not too long time, we are going to allow also NSO and CNC to access configuration of these tests. So today we only support the SLA type service test that you saw here today that shows delay, jitter, packet loss over time. Very granular data, very high accuracy, and very many metrics. Also back to what Clarence talked about, not only the min, max, and average, we report up to 12 different percentiles of distribution of every single delay and jitter and delay variation data point. So we are adding alerting into NSO. This will allow Nils Petter to automatically react to something that Skylight detects. It could be a loss event like this one. It could be that we proactively monitor latency for 10 different paths. And Skylight also grabs the energy data, for example, for those 10 paths. And Nils Petter could then pick the right link to still fulfill the latency requirement, but use the least amount of energy for that particular service. Additional test types, I talked about those, so those are coming also in the fall. And we are extending the metadata set so that NSO can provide even more feedback and information into Skylight based on what the information that NSO has in its databases.
Okay, as a wrap up, so we got a lot of information about Skylight. Main message here is design your service in NSO, as you usually do. You all most of you are experts on it. Add the monitoring to a service for the specific individual services. And hence you can always then not only follow the life cycle of the service, but also monitor the life cycle of the service itself. So next step, there will be Accedian demos tomorrow. We have a roadmap session on Thursday for NSO, interesting audio inputs. But before that, this afternoon, there's a fantastic lab, how to reach the further up in the level of automation, the reach level 5 by Jan Lindblad and his friends Per and Jonas. And there you will get the opportunity to get into the nitty-gritty details of everything we talk about here. So you would like to say something?
Thank you. Thank you. That's better. So last year, I was here on the stage and talking about the 8 cornerstones and the 5 different network automation levels. Does anybody remember seeing that? Okay, yeah, there's quite a few. Okay, good. So if I ask you, can you explain those concepts to me now? Can you still raise your hand? Oh, I thought so. So that's why we made a lab. We made the same thing, but in a lab version, so you get your hands on and can deep dive into those concepts and see how that feels when you're actually developing services. If you want to participate in that thing, there's a lab at 1 o'clock after lunch today. The good news is you can take this. We have made a service, a normal level 3 kind of service, which means you have edge devices that connect to data centers, and you configure which edge device connects to which data center, and NSO deploys that. That's the starting point for this lab. Then we are adding the Skylight things so that these connections, they're being monitored by Skylight, simulated, okay, but it looks the same as a real thing. And then it detects that, oh, the connection between this edge service and this data center is not so good. So it will automatically move this service over from one data center to another. That's level 4. And then on level 5, we take this whole thing so that it's automatically moving services all the time to the best data center, continuously optimizing what they... That's the level 5 implementation. So that was the good news. If you want to get your hands on, you can do all of these things in an afternoon. The bad news, it takes the whole afternoon. If you want to join us at 1 o'clock, it's in the WOW room. You go step to steps here and up another steps there, and you'll find it in the panorama area.
It's a very well spent afternoon, I would say, if you're interested in assurance and automation.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Thanks, guys. That was a great session. I particularly enjoyed the onstage choreography as a metaphor for how well Accedian and NSO work well together. So one quick question. So Accedian has an API already, so why the need for the NED?
We wanted to build something that was modeled together with the Cisco teams, with CNC and with NSO. So it was actually driven by the Cisco organization to do this. We
Do you have comments?
Yeah. So we always... That was a nice answer.
Yeah.
I have an additional answer.
Yeah.
Shall I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We always have NEDs.
This is not rehearsed, in case you were wondering.
So it's just what I would like to highlight a fundamental thing of NSO, because in this sense we see Accedian controller as yet another controller, and that's what we're trying to explain. It's yet another device, and then you can actually add it to your service model. For that, we always use NEDs. That's the thing. And now we talked about the Skylight NED, and that's yet another NED, and it's standard ways of operation for the NSO team. Even though there are standard APIs, good question about when we talk about standard APIs for NSO, typically they are YANG-based, RESTconf, NetConf, and GNMI, and how we treat those standard-based APIs. I think Jonas Johansson will have a session a little bit about that on Thursday. But the key message here is we need a NED for anything we interact with.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.